Hello, Sandy.
Hello.
Do I like how this looks? No. Maybe we'll do this one. Yeah, I think this one. All right. We'll wait. We'll wait a few minutes for the rest of the queue to join. How have you been? How's your week been?
Good. I've been good. I had a nice time with my son over the weekend, and I ended up having 3 out of 4 days off with my regular day off, plus not realizing like we got 2 holidays over the last weekend, so I only had
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, so he was happy with that. So yeah, and very, very good for me too. So
I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
I think in let's see. I think we will.
Okay, you do have a split screen. I knew it looked slightly.
Oh, what is that? How do I have a split screen over here?
I don't know. You've got it twice. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a split screen.
Something to do with.
Close this up. What are you even seeing right now? I don't even know how you're seeing this anymore. Because this is shut up. Excuse me for a moment, and all who watching, sorry for the technical difficulties. 1 second. That is strange. Remove. Okay, let's try this again. Where is Brit? Brit Shalom, sorry. Brit Shalom. Okay. Okay. Present. Share screen. Window. Share. Okay, at the stage. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Thank God. Good to see you.
How's it going, Sandy?
Good, thanks.
Sorry, I had an issue over here. Okay, chapter 13 and chapter 14. Great. I know that Bill was thinking of joining, and Jonathan's not going to make it. Thank you so much for showing me how to make those events.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
No, pretty nifty.
And I know I owe you still some stuff on Magic. I haven't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so let's who's joining us over here? The man himself. Oh, I see. Andrew. Hello, sir. I hope all's well.
What's popping?
You on your way to the gym?
No, to work.
Nice.
What is that a shirt of? I mean, I see it's a corporate shirt, but where are you working?
Chick-fil-A, let's go.
All right, let's go. Okay. It's amazing that you're keeping a kosher Chick-fil-A. Wow. It's incredible. Really going above and beyond. You know what I mean? He sits down in Chick-fil-A, people come in, he's giving them like telling them about Noahide. So like, I just want like from fried chicken, dude. Okay. Okay. I won't go down that line. That route. Okay, chapter 14, the ethical conduct. This is the last chapter. Very, very exciting. Way to go to all you guys. And we will move through this one. I think we'll stop at, if we get that far, but we'll stop, I think, at acts of loving kindness. I think that's a good place to stop. Maybe we'll see how our timing goes. Maybe we'll continue or not. Okay. And without further ado, Sandy, can you take us with the verses and take us into, let's just start with the verses.
Yep. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6:18. He has told you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and walk modestly with your God. Micah 6, verse 8.
Right. So, what's interesting over here is that we are not being told, okay, in this verse, specifically the verse is Micah, we're not being told about mitzvah, right? We're not being told about commandments over here. We're being told to only do justice, which part of doing mitzvahs includes justice, right? And love and goodness, right? And walk modestly with your God. So it's we're being told over here that we have to act in this manner. And this is also what God, also why he chooses Abraham, right? He sees that that Abraham is going to make sure that his children and his descendants keep on with this tradition. And that's what God was specifically looking for. It wasn't enough for him that Enoch was holy but couldn't connect to the people. And it didn't help him that Noah was a righteous person, but also didn't care enough to ask God to save the rest of the world, and didn't put up a fight and sort of was siloed. And that's why he's also in his own ark, so to speak. Becomes Abraham, and we see him embodying these attributes and these virtues as well. And that's what God is looking for. Now, we could ask, what does that mean to do justice? What does it mean to do, or here it says earlier, to be right and good in the eyes of Hashem, right? And you could say that if we're talking about the 613, you've already told us this, right? So why are we saying right now, mentioning this again? We should be aware that we're constantly under observation. God is always watching us. And while there's the 613 that we need to be doing, ultimately speaking, God is always watching what we're doing. And the way we behave in this world is being seen by the master of the universe. Let's move on with number 1. What do you say, Antonio? You want to take it on?
It is stated in the Torah, "What does the Lord your God ask of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all of his ways, and to love him." The sages explain how to walk in his ways. Just as he is merciful, you too should be merciful. Just as he is charitable, you too should be charitable. Just as he clothes the naked, you too should clothe the naked. And the general principle is that a person should perform all of his deeds and activities ethically and with integrity, in a manner that he likens himself to the Creator, walking in paths that are good and straight.
Right. Okay. So we see over here this it's telling us to be the example, right? We are made in God's image, and and this is really the closest thing we could get to. In Hebrew, it's mahu rachum afata rachum, right? Just as he is merciful, you too should be merciful. Does that mean that when we are merciful, that's exactly what God is doing? Not necessarily, right? There's obviously still a very large gap between us and the master and the creator of the universe. Having said that, we see, and we are being told that this is a certain way where we could echo that, or we could sort of feel out in the dark how God is behaving as well, and what he wants to see from us. And this is how we cling to him as well. So when we're reading the Bible, as we all are all Bible readers over here, we're really being told, look how God was speaking to his people. Look how he was interacting with the people of the world. And that is how he wants to see us, right? And again, we see when Jonah goes over to Nineveh, he's not talking to them. In general, the prophets are not having conversations with the Gentiles about keeping the commandments. They want to see proper behavior. They want to see ethical behavior. God wants to see us. In Yiddish, it's called being a mensch, right? Being a man. And by man, I don't mean like not being a woman. I mean just being representing God properly, being that image of God. Okay, onwards. Number 2, therefore, a person should scrutinize his deeds and his character traits and examine the qualities of his soul to see if he is walking in these paths, right? So it's very easy to say that, great, I'm going to be like God, I'm going to do those things, and now basically that's all I needed to do, and I'm off to my work. At the end of the day, you actually have to scrutinize and see, are you actually, who's joining us right now? Bill, we missed you. Right, actually, in Pirkei Avot, we say Yehuda ben Tema says, Heve az kanamer, I'm just saying it in my head in Hebrew, and then we'll translate it into English. Kal kanesha v'ratz katzvi v'gibor ka'ari lasot et ratzon avicha shebashamayim. So this Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said, we should be light as an eagle, as bold as a tiger, as light as an eagle, running like a deer, and brave as a lion to do what God wants us to do. Now, there's a Pirkei Avot class you could guys go into. Specifically, the rabbis give an explanation about the deer. So, what does this mean that the deer? Why are we being? What is this example of a deer? So, not only is the deer quick to go do good things, right? He moves very quickly in order to capitalize on the mitzvot and good deeds that he could do. But when the deer runs, usually when he's running at high speeds, he also turns around. Naturally, he does this. And that's because he is aware that he always has to look back. Is the lion behind me? Is the evil inclination behind me? Right? So even I'm rushing to perform a mitzvah or do a good deed, it could be that the evil inclination is running right alongside me, celebrating his victory. Right? He's thinking, I could be thinking that I'm doing a great deed right now, but really I don't realize that I have ego involved, that I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. So one always must check himself. So even though we just said number one, that we should just emulate ourselves like God and act in such a manner, we also need to scrutinize, self-examine, and really, really take a long and deep, hard look at ourselves and see, are we always making sure we're behaving in that manner? Andrew, since you're sitting, how about you take number 3?
Among the good traits that a person should acquire from himself are love for people, generosity, courage, a pleasant appearance, humility, pleasant demeanor, shyness, compassion, joyfulness, tranquility, speaking well of others, being content with little, restraint, alacrity, integrity, and kindness.
And kindness. Right, so we see this beautiful section over here where really it's a very long list, but it's beautiful. We're asking it, like, and it could seem like courage and humility might be clashing, but in a sense, it's all in the right context and in the right place. When do you need to be these things? But these are all things that we need to embody. And you could see over here restraint and being kind and integrity. These are all things that, of course, we want to see in ourselves, in our children, in our leaders. But this is something that we really need to think about. We sometimes forget, or we have a Hollywood sense of looking at the world. But these are things that people can and have done in the past and have behaved this way. And we have to remember that this is really the prerequisite of keeping the commandments. While many of these things end up becoming part of the commandments as well, there's something in Hebrew called besever panim yafot, and doing it in a pleasant manner. Right? We want to be acting and behaving in this world in a pleasant manner, that we're pleasant to ourselves, to our spouses, to our communities, and to others around us. King Solomon said, whoever loves money will never have enough money. And the sages said, who is rich? Whoever is happy with his lot. Right? So it's ironic, obviously, that we hear it from Solomon, because Solomon had, the kings should not have many horses and many wives, but yet we know with Solomon that seemingly there was a transgression over here. It's important to understand Solomon's intentions at the time. Solomon being the wisest of all men, aside from Moses. That's a separate topic. But being the wisest of all men, there was an understanding that he was trying to bring this universal time during his reign. And his marriage with all these women was not from a sense of lust or uncontrolled love for women. Rather, he was trying to create alliances with the people around him, right? Trying to create some sort of peace. And when these wives of his brought in idol worship into the temple, Solomon, being Solomon, recognizing, like we spoke about in the past about Shituf, and understanding that there is a history, and understanding that the Gentiles of the world have relationships through different mediations. Solomon, seeing this and understanding this, wasn't so bothered by this, right? He ultimately was looking at the bigger picture, saying like, we're all at the temple right now. We're making our way towards unification, recognizing God, and slowly but surely they'll understand. However, it was clearly way too soon to do it at that time. There was still a lot of confusion going on, and it did not end very well. So we should realize that wasn't his goal, and nevertheless, he made mistakes. And one should realize also at one point to be content, right? So the sages are telling us who is happy with his lot. That doesn't mean I can't make more money, right? If I have an opportunity right now to invest in some great stock, be like, well, I have enough money in my wallet right now, so I'm not going to make this investment. Of course you should, but that can't be the goal. The goal is not how much money am I making, next year's bonus. And again, you should have a good life. We want to make sure your kid could go to a good college or your daughter could go to a good college. All those things are true. Nevertheless, that can't be the one thing we're running after all the time. Number 5, Sandy, why don't you take it away?
The desirable path is to adopt moderation in all character traits, not to go to extremes.
Right. So already in section 3, we had all these different character traits that were being offered, and we said we have to do it in the right context. Here we're giving an example, or we're being told through the methodology of Maimonides, which is the golden path, which is an idea that he also he received from other philosophers at the time. Nevertheless, he saw this to be true, and just to realize it's according to Maimonides, he is seeing that the philosophers are tapping into a Torah truth, not that the Torah is adopting what the philosophers are saying. Nevertheless, if the philosophers, or we'll go all the way back to our day today, or we'll go forward to our day today, if Jordan Peterson is articulating Torah wisdom in his biblical classes, there's no reason for us to not appreciate that, understand that, look at that, and use that to learn Torah and spread God's name in the world. So back to Maimonides, it was very important for him to adapt this moderation, right? When is the right time to be excited? When is the right time to be calm? And generally speaking, always be walking in that middle path, right? There are, of course, exceptions, but one can't or can't get too angry. However, on the other hand, one doesn't want to be a pushover, right? So there's always this balance that we're trying to maintain. 6, although it is impossible for a person to rectify all of his deeds at once, he should always make every effort to improve and become better little by little. And by doing so, he will accustom himself to walk in the good and straight path, since a person's character depends on his habits. Now, there will be some people that dispute that science, right? That there's that cause effect over there. However, we could see this in the New Year's resolution every year, right? This year, I'm quitting smoking altogether. And then the next morning, he's waking up and he's smoking, right? Little by little, this makes sense to little bite size of things that you could actually handle. And this is very relevant for Noahides or people that are considering taking on or walking the Noahide path, which is, it's not from 0 to 100. There's a time of exploration. There's a time of where you're developing that relationship. We also have to remember that, and I mention this often, Naaseh v'nishma, what the Israelites said at the foot of Mount Sinai, right? They said Naaseh v'nishma, which means we will hear, we will do, and we will hear. As in, first we're just going to do what we're told. Later on, we'll start thinking about these things. But you have to understand that the context of that happening, they just went through all of the Exodus of Egypt, right? So they got to see all that light show. Then they get to see the miracles of Mount Sinai, get to hear God's voice, right? So, it's very easy for them to be like, yeah, whatever you want, God, like, we're with you. We don't even have to hear the explanation. We're buying what you're selling. That is something that we want to aspire to. However, in today's day and age, and definitely for someone coming from afar that wants to reconnect, it's okay to first say, I need to understand before I do, right? I understand that there's the wanting to do first, but a part of me also needs to understand so I feel comfortable with this. So when you're taking on things and when you are trying to engage in this holy and sanctified life, mind your footing, do so carefully and slowly, and don't bite off more than you can chew. That doesn't mean that you can't be like Nachshon ben Aminadav, who jumped first into the water of the Sea of Reeds, as we say, and it came up, the water kept on going up all the way till his mouth and his nose, and then it opened up. And there's sometimes it makes sense to get in a little over your head. Generally speaking, though, realize that you should do things slowly because you don't want to have a paradoxical effect, right? You don't want to suddenly feel like this is too much. I want nothing to do with it anymore. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. We are very, very powerful if we believe in ourselves. Use that inner David Goggins. Have that telling you that you could keep on running, or whatever he's selling on Joe Rogan that week. Number 6, Antonio, why don't you take us there? Number 7 and 8.
A person has the responsibility to educate his children so that they acquire good character traits and a proper outlook on life. When someone does not educate his children, it is as though he hates them. A person should be very careful not to behave in a manner that will lead to desecration of God's name. In other words, that will bring shame to the name of the Lord, or to his Torah, or his commandments, or to the nation of Israel. And everything a person does that brings honor to God, Torah, or Israel sanctifies God's name.
Right. So going back to number 7, which ends in this very intense line about as if he hates him, right? Like, so again, this is the rabbi speaking in a harsh language to teach a lesson, and in the context. I don't believe, and most of the rabbis and their interpretations that I know are not saying that this means to actually hate your son. However, there's a sense as parents, we know this, that our kids could be very challenging, and the sense of also self-disappointment as well when you see your son is not following suit, not behaving properly. There's a sense of also like internal failure, and there could be resentment could be built up as well. And that's something Jordan Peterson also talks about a lot about, make sure that other people want to smile at your kids. They're not giving like a fake smile, right? Like that they realize that they're behaving in an inappropriate manner. So there's only so much we could trust teachers. Definitely with today's new brand of teachers, which seems like really crazy in the Western world. But generally speaking, while the teachers are with them many hours of the day, it's our responsibility, right? And we really need to work very, very hard on that. The Torah tells us also how the Gemara tells us that you must teach your son how to swim. And while we can interpret that as actually swimming, it also means dealing with life situations. Right? When one has to find himself in a place where if it's either sink or swim, right? You can't necessarily turn back. You got to actually move forward. You got to pedal. You got to move your hands. So this is something that could be also looked at conceptually, really making sure your kid is, what's the book by Jonathan Haidt? You're not coddling them too much, right? The coddling the American mind. This is very much, you want to make sure that you are teaching your son properly. Having said that, we also are taught by Solomon, Chanoch et anar lefi darko. Right, teach the son according to, make sure your educational tools fit the kind of temperament your son has. We learn this, of course, also from Jacob and Esau, which if only their father would have taught them a little differently and raised them differently and not assumed each one would be raised the same, they might have had a different, what's the word I'm looking for? We would have a different outcome with how that brotherly feud ended. So we have to be very, very careful about that. With regards to number 8, we have to realize that, again, we represent God, whether we're Jews, Israelites, Noahides, and of course, all humankind, of course, represent God. But this is also one of the reasons why we wear a kippah on our head, right? This is to remind us that there's something above us. And this is also, in a certain sense, to remind yourself that you are being watched both from above and to create a sense of social pressure that you'll be committed to and pressured by to make sure that you stay in the straight and narrow. If people are looking at you and seeing that you are someone that is supposed to be representing God, and now I'm seeing you behave like a complete fool, then that is also going to be a desecration. So it's a responsibility, right? You can be like, then why wear the kippah? If you're taking that risk of how you're going to behave and people are going to look at you, then don't do that. So obviously we are proud wearing that badge. Having said that, that takes on, with great power comes great responsibility, as Uncle Ben used to tell Peter Parker, right? So now there's a general thing that we could touch on, which is, what does that even mean, desecrating God, right? If God is perfect, how can my behavior in any sense create a desecration for God, right? So if you notice that in the Tanakh and in the sages, it's never saying God is being desecrated, rather that his name is being desecrated. So he mentioned, God speaks about this as well, specifically in Leviticus, I believe, right? So this is, again, it's impossible to desecrate God's name, but we could desecrate God, but desecrating his name is desecrating his will, his divine presence, what he wants from us. By acting a fool, we are desecrating his name. So just to clarify that point. Number 9. Antonio, do you mind?
It is fitting for a person to stand by his word, to verbalize what he truly holds in his heart, and to distance himself from lies.
This is another famous, Jordan Peterson line, right? At least tell the truth, or at least don't lie. So also it's very, very important. Also a little tidbit of Uri Sherki, our spiritual leader. He gave Jordan Peterson a Brit Olam book. He gave them both, and he said, your biblical series are great, but I think you should be using this and the Hebrew Bible instead of the New Testament for your spiritual sustenance. He also actually gave it to the new president of Argentina, who was thinking of converting to Judaism. But from what I understand with a conversation with Rabbi Shirky, he was told that's not necessary, right? You don't have to convert. And he also was very eager to get the Brit Shalom book as well. So you guys are in good are in good company. But sheker, by the way, just the sense of lying, or the word lying, is shin kuf resh. And it's not the order, but those are all letters that are all bunched together at the end of the alphabet, at the end of the aleph bet. And it's in a sense which is just like the letters are consecutive, so too if you start lying, another lie follows. It's a very, 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 very slippery slope, and one has to be very, very careful. So whenever you can, really do your best to speak the truth. And we have to ask ourselves what that looks like, because we could all say here that, look, we teach our kids not to lie and not to make stuff up. Great. Do we use our cousin's Netflix account? Right? That's like a little white lie. And when I'm standing in line and I can see an opening that I could take that opening and then I'll be ahead of line and no one's going to notice and no one's going to be upset. But nevertheless, I still I was dishonest. So obviously we're human and there's a culture we're around, but people need to be aware of that, because all of these things are little mini lies. And there isn't really a loophole for that, where God says, listen, if it was a great Netflix show, I too was binging it. So I understand. I'm also using your cousin's sign and stuff, but we need to be careful. There are these little white lies. Sometimes even with the words we use, I've used this example in the past, but the fact that society now has turned the word literally into figuratively, and then the way we speak itself, we should be careful that we should be very clear and not being deceptive or confusing for how people want to understand us. But more specifically, we all know our own little white lies, and we should all work on those little white lies. Again, all within reason and within context. We don't have to make ourselves crazy, but we have to realize that this is how humans behave, and God wants us to step up. He expects more from us, and he believes in us, and as we should believe in ourselves as well. Number 10. A person should not do anything to arouse suspicion that he is a thief or that he is involved in any other wrongdoings, right? So obviously, if we're talking about, and this clearly relates to number 8 with regards to the desecration of God's name, we have a reputation. We should be aware of our surroundings, who is watching us at all times. This is something that we have to take into consideration. After the facts, trying to explain, no, you don't understand, I was taking your cart to really help you. It's not going to work, right? And you're going to, even if you were right, people are still going to judge you. So we should be very, very careful with how we act and realize that people are quick to judge. We shouldn't be quick to judge, but just because we already know about ourselves that we're quick to judge, we should realize to make sure we're not in those situations that could be very, very problematic. And as growing up to a teacher in a girls' seminary, my mother. So she was very, very cautious about, Chazi, someone said that they saw you in town and you were with those people. And like, they're going to give you a bad name. You should be careful. So like, I'm sure we've all gone through this. People need to be very careful. And she knows, I know you didn't do anything wrong, but those other kids are not going to differentiate between those things. So one always has to be very, very careful. 11, a person should neither cause a blind person to stumble, nor cause someone or curse someone who is deaf. Similarly, a person should not cause someone else to violate a commandment, since the violator is likened to someone who is blind, since he did not know what he did was forbidden. For this same reason, it is forbidden to assist others in committing sins. So we could obviously be talking about not just someone that's literally blind and literally deaf, because that's sort of like obvious, right? We don't want to be tripping blind people, but someone that are not aware what's going on. They're not, and I could know, right? So I hear we're at the water park right now, and we're waiting on line X, and everyone's waiting on line X and line Y. And then we hear the guy say, line Y is now closed, only line X is open. And I noticed that these people didn't hear it, right? So I could decide to not let them know, or I could decide to be like, no, there's a wrong happening over here right now, right? I'm gaining because they were not aware or they don't know about this. And I have to be very careful how I take advantage. I don't want to take advantage of those situations. And I'm sure we've been in situations like this, again, where we're giving someone some advice. And sometimes we have to be careful ourselves. I'm pretty sure I could give them good advice, but I'm not really sure about myself if I know the answer, right? So one should be very, very wary about these things. And we have to be very careful from misguiding people. You have today 1,001 podcasts online where someone buys himself a microphone and suddenly he could be telling people, giving people psychological advice just because he read, an article once on Wikipedia. So people have to be very, very careful with how they're behaving and what they're saying. Number 12. Do you want to take this, Antonio? Or you know what, Bill, do you mind taking it?
Yeah, I'll take it. You said number 12. Giving harmful counsel is akin to causing a blind person to stumble, and all the more so if done for the benefit of the malefactor.
Right. So this also relates to number 11 in a certain sense. And like a good example of this, or a relevant example for us over here, would be for our Christian friends, right? Which is, I'm a Noahide right now, and I have a mother-in-law or a mother or a wife or a brother that wants to be participating in some things that we as Jews and a Noahide see as problematic, but they don't, right? So can I help them do this? Can I participate in this act? Or by knowing, I know now that what they're doing is problematic, do I say anything, right? So we've discussed this many times where to be delicate, sensitive about these situations, right? We're not trying to cause more stress. So are there things, ideally, if I could make sure I'm not involved in it, or I don't have to help, then obviously if I could do that without creating tension, then great. And if not, then I try to minimize the effect of those things. But one has to be very, very careful, right? The example we've given in the past is I'm going now to my father's grave and there's a cross over there, but it's filthy, right? So am I right now, my wife comes and says, go with the kids and go clean this off right now. Do I say like, no, this is out of worship, having the kids do it, it's a stumbling block? Or do I realize, no, this is okay within the context, and taking in mind the things what we studied and the things we learned, maybe this is the time to employ the understanding of the rabbis that understand shituf. So maybe this is relevant for that moment. So again, one has to be careful, which is you don't want to have someone stumble, but we also have to be sensitive as well. Was that clear or was that confusing? I'm asking you guys. Okay, good. 13, Antonio.
It is appropriate to have compassion on helpless strangers and not to cause them suffering. No one should cause a widow or an orphan or any depressed spirit to suffer, and they should be treated with respect.
So this is written and told to us by God, right? The orphan and the widow. And we have a hero over here named Bill that obviously deals with these foster children and this in this world as well. But this is what God is saying. You have to watch over these people. Obviously, God watches over all of us, but this is what God is expecting from us. You need to protect them because they have no one else. And I've given you this world to steward. So it's your responsibility to take care of these people. And I mean, we see this also with Cain and Abel, right? Which God asks him, where's your brother, right? So his answer is, am I my brother's keeper? And the answer is yes, you are your brother's keeper. Our job is to watch them. And even when the mark of Cain, in Hebrew, it's ot, which means also letter, not just mark. And the Midrash talks about how even Cain had a letter and reminding him that when you're ready, you are welcome to come back and be part of all the letters of the alphabet, all the letters of the people of Israel. This is a place for reconciliation, but we have to remember that we could read the words when we're all together, when the letters are all come back home, and then you could actually create sequences out of them. But if you are just completely ignoring what's helping around you, then that's not what God wants. I would even stretch this and say, when we read about a depressed spirit, we have to be very, very sensitive to, and what we know today are there's a lot of people that are dealing with mental illness. And I'm not saying that this is mental illness, of course, but even in the LGBTQ community, here too, we have to realize a lot of these people have a depressed spirit. And one should be very cautious how we interact with them and how sensitive we are with these people, because they too are hurting. And that doesn't mean now, right? Just because there's a widow, I don't decide that now the widow becomes the president necessarily, but I still am aware of what's going on around me and have to be sensitive to those things. 14, Sandy.
No one should cause another person to suffer, either through speech or through action, to hurt or embarrass him. The sages said it is better for a person to throw himself into a fiery furnace than to embarrass someone else in public.
The rabbis, they love these intense lines. You have to assume like Judah the Prince was talking to them. He's like, guys, come on, just like tone it down a little. But we have over here what to me, this is very apropos with the age of social media. People have to be extremely, extremely careful with hurting, embarrassing one another. The reference over here to the furnace is talking about the biblical story of Judah and Tamar, his daughter-in-law, and how that confusion happened. And we see over there that ultimately Judah, once he realizes what happened and the transgression, he takes responsibility, right? So if we're being harmful to someone or we cause an issue, we have to realize we have to take responsibility. So we see that with Judah, but we also see with Tamar that even though this also happened, she was willing to, because she was going to be sentenced to be burnt in the furnace. She was going to be killed. So ultimately, at the end, when Judah speaks up, she gets saved. But she was willing to basically get killed in order not to embarrass him, right? So here too, that's obviously an extreme, but we have to be very, very sensitive to this. And also, Jonathan Haidt talks about how the rates of suicide attempts and depression for young teens has skyrocketed, right? So that's a very, very, very scary stat to think about. I think it went up like by 90% or something like that. And that is, we don't realize the power of our words and how they're amplified by social media. So one has to be very, very careful with this, specifically in this day and age, and also teach our kids and raise our kids in a way to be very, very sensitive to this as well. I tell my son, or when he comes home from school, I always ask them, both of them, did you notice anyone crying? Did you see, after did you have a good day and do you have homework? Notice what's happening around you. Are you seeing anyone else that is having a hard time? Are you seeing a depressed spirit, right? And if so, you got to reach out. Maybe you don't have the answer, but you still have to reach out and be sensitive to these things, and definitely how we're speaking to them and how we're behaving. No one should engage in conflicts or quarrels. Obviously there's wars to have, right? And people have seen Jacob and I have a conversation or two, and they might have seemed like they were fighting words. Nevertheless, when it's a Torah conflict for its own sake, for the Torah's sake, then that's a different kind of conflict. But generally speaking, be smart, not right. Okay? You want to be sensitive to what's around you. You want to try to ultimately get to sort of peace. This goes back to what we said about Maimonides of picking the middle road, right? Try to avoid the conflict. It doesn't matter that you're going to show him. What we really want to show our kids is how we know how to diffuse a situation, how we know not to be prideful. So again, in Hebrew, it's tiyeh chacham al tiyeh tzodek, right? Be smart, don't be right. And definitely when dealing with people with crazy road rage, one has to be very, very careful. Number 16, the sages said, do not appease your fellow when he is angry, and do not console him when his dead relative lies before him, and do not attempt to see him at the time of his degradation. This is from Pirkei Avot, 461. Yes, Mishnah Avot. Okay, so first off, we're not talking about that the dead person is literally lying right in front of him, right? It means that someone has recently passed away, right? So these examples, because we could use just other things that happen in people's life and we should be sensitive about, but they represent all different types of cases and situations where it could be compressed into these things right here. And all of them have this moment of confrontation, this hesitation between different options. And there's a greatness about of like facing this, but only an existential dilemma could create such a moment, right? Like only when a moment of death happens, or a moment where like there's a degradation, or what was the other one we said over here, which is when he's angry, right? So when these moments are happening, there's a spark of potentiality, right? So when I'm angry, I'm struggling with my own perspective, right? It's not necessarily like an actual event happened, and this is like I'm doing like a self reassessment, what's going on, and it's very important to make sure that internal processing is happening, and not to be overtaken by someone trying to give you like external validation, right? You have to let someone sort of rest and be in his own anger for a moment before you telling him, no, it's okay, no, calm down. Like, no, he might need this for himself right now. And when dealing with death, of course, and I am fortunate that I didn't have to deal with this so much, thank God, but we all have to deal with this in our life. So there's clearly a deep pain realizing that this life you shared with someone is no longer part of your tangible reality, and it becomes something more abstract, and then eventually like not doubted by others, but it becomes less and less real, and that's very hard for us to let go of. And there's this whole tension of us having to deal with when someone dies, because then it becomes relevant for us to think about this, which is existence and not existence, right? The spiritual, the physical, these are all things that start bubbling up once I have to deal with someone that's dying. And if you barge into the room and be like, hey, it's okay, people die all the time, you just ruin that process. It's external comfort is obviously good, but if it's immediate and if it's superficial, it is failing to acknowledge the depth of this transition that I'm going through. So one has to be extremely careful about that. And with regards to the degradation over here, so here too, we could ask, we are told to to rebuke your neighbor if you see your neighbor doing something wrong. There's a difference between to see him, to observe him, and to rebuke. So rebuking is more about the act someone is doing, and it's less personal. Observation is like a deep contemplation. I'm looking at someone, I'm studying someone, I have like my own thoughts about how he's behaving and what he wants. And this could create a lot of embarrassment to the person. This could end up having him spiral downwards, right? Like you could have also, again, like a paradoxical effect over here. And there's even a sense when someone sins, he's exposing a certain nature of himself. And here too, he's giving himself a crucial moment to sort of look into himself and reassess. So all these are examples where the Torah is telling us, or the rabbis are telling us, to be extremely sensitive when someone's going through a major change in their life, or going through a major event, and us coming in and jumping in and trying to immediately console them. So one has to be very, very careful with that. I'm sorry if I went a little too deep on that one. 17. Having a trade profession is one of the ways to serve God. The sages said that whoever does not teach his son a trade is as though he teaches him to steal. Okay, so here too, we are here to improve the world. We are here to create. We are here to be productive. And that's what God is expecting from us, right? He doesn't want us sitting in front of our computers all day doing nothing, or being in our little sensory depredation tanks, right? Completely disconnected from the world. He wants us engaged. That's why all these commandments are very much involved with everything that's happening around us, right? Enoch, or the monk living on the mountain, or even the prophet. The idea is to come down from the mountain and speak to the people, right? So we have to be very aware that God wants us to be productive. He wants us to be interacting. And we don't want to be living on handouts. There's people that, of course, that are poor that we always want to support. And at times it makes sense. I was newlywed, and I was very fortunate that my in-laws during those early years decided to help me, and that's great. And I felt like a lot of support when that was happening. Having said that, at some point, one has to know how to fend for himself, live for himself, take pride for himself, being a part of this world and creating in this world as well. One could ask and wonder, I guess an influencer is influencing, but I'm just the concept of an influencer, right? You have today, I don't know if you've seen this, there's this thing online, which is reaction videos. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Sandy, but people, right? We're having the Noahide class right now. Some guy in Bangladesh is going to watch this and react to it with his friends. And he's like, look at Chezi just pointed his finger. That's so crazy. And then you have to ask, what's happening right now? Is this in any way productive? This is so meta about them talking about what he meant when he said the word productive. Nothing's happening, right? So that's not where God wants us living, in this world where people are just watching a butterfly or just doing anything. He wants us interactive. He wants us doing things, so much so that this is considered serving God, right? Just like we said, he is merciful. God himself created the world, right? So here too, he wants to see us being creative as well. Number 18, Antonio.
Being healthy and physically and mentally fit is one of the ways to serve God. Therefore, a person needs to preserve his health and should refrain from doing things that harm his body.
So also, Maimonides, the Rambam, was very, very into this about the 8 hours of sleep and how you're using your day. So these are all true. We all obviously today, ideas of your body's a temple, right? They all stem from these kind of elements. If I'm not feeling well, I won't be able to pray. If I can't run fast, I can't run to do good commandments. So of course we have to take care of our body. Our body, life is a gift that God gave us. Here too, we are starting to bump up against what the ramifications are for AI and bioengineering, right? So if 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I'm not going to go to a shrink, right? That's sounded like nonsense. Today, we went overboard. Everyone has anxieties. Everyone has mental illness. Everyone's taking pills. But there's a sense where people realize that getting help, therapy, these are things that are important. Taking care of ourselves, our wellness is important. One would have to start asking then, okay, so if technologically speaking or biologically speaking, I could make sure I can never get sick. Is that something I should be taking on? If I could do that medically? And if so, what does that mean now? Does that change how prayer works? So one has to be very careful with at what point do we stop becoming humans and then that Torah becomes less relevant to people that are not humans. So we're not there yet, but these things could happen within 20 years, 2 years, who knows? But we have to be sensitive. And I believe wholeheartedly that our Torah and the sages with their infinite wisdom will also have responses to that. But nevertheless, these are things that are challenges. Fortunately, God is giving us a living Torah. But part of that living Torah requires for us to engage in it and engage with it. So for it to be alive, God wants to see us taking part with him, just like we saw in number 17. Number 19, since a person is greatly influenced by the people around him, a person should choose good and honest people who will influence him favorably to be his friends. He should also attach himself to wise people and righteous people and should distance himself as far as possible from degenerate society, right? So we all know what Hollywood is offering us today in the world. And we have to be very, very careful with who our friends are, which I think why the TLC is actually a beautiful place, because in a certain way, it is allowing in today's day and age to curate, so those kind of friends. And there could be a guy living in Sheboygan that has no one. Nevertheless, he could go on TLC or go onto his own group and suddenly have many, many virtual friends. And virtually not alone, I guess, is tapping into this chapter 9, this section 19 over here, where we have to be extremely, extremely careful about this. And definitely for a Noahide community, or one that is growing or is emerging, one should try his best to select those people, if he can, that he wants to be around. These are the people we want our kids to see, the adults we want them to grow on with. And it's difficult. Like, I can't just get up and move right now, leave this neighborhood. But if you're in a place right now where it's completely corrupt, completely falling apart, it will affect you. Just like we talked about, taking on those good habits will affect you. Being in that surrounding will affect you as well. And we see this, of course. It's very easy to see this with kids, how when they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, how they're affected, how they're suddenly coming home and talking to you. Who taught you to speak that way? So if we want to avoid that, of course, we want them growing up in places where that could happen properly. If you guys don't mind, I know there's a few more minutes, so I would say let's just take this to, if there's any comments or thoughts, and then I got to pack. Like I told you guys, I'm going to be flying begrudgingly to New York. I'm very happy to be going with my kids, and they should have a great time, but leaving Israel is always difficult. I don't like leaving the country. But I'm excited for my kids to see the Natural History Museum. Having said that, we are also going to be pushing off next week's class to the following week, and then we might have again a little break because of Pesach. But I'm assuming in 2 more classes or so we will be done with Brit Shalom, and we'll be moving on to the prayer book as well. Yes. Any questions, thoughts, comments, complaints? Bill, you doing all right?
Looks like he's in a hammock. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I am in a hammock.
Nice.
I am currently unemployed, so I'm enjoying the next few days.
I don't know. We were reading about being productive. I don't know.
Well, I got plenty of time to be productive.
I'll just make one comment with regards to our friend Brian came back onto the stream, onto the Discord. I saw Jacob was talking to him, and Bill was having heart palpitations from seeing the video that Brian sent. I agree with Jacob. It's a little sad. I was about to see that video, and I wanted to be like, "Do you guys know what Noahides are?" Like, where everyone, A, the answer is no. They're clearly not aware. And B, like you said, Bill, the difference between salvation and redemption. They just don't. It's very sad because none of us need to be saved. We all want to be redeemed, and we take part of that process. So again, I salute you all very, very much, and I am wishing you guys a fantastic week. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Have a safe trip, Hezzy.
Shalom and peace.
Be safe.
Bam, bam.